Hello everybody! I hope you're all having a fun, bright, happy day. Today I am gathered here with some of my books, my John Green books specifically, because I thought now that I am pretty much done reading all the books that John Green wrote himself, I wanted to give my review and my thoughts and my opinions and share just some of what I think about the books and how it's changed my life and changed my perspective on things. And maybe you guys would be interested in hearing that. So that's exactly what I'm doing today. I'm going to be giving a recap of all the books, saying what I liked about them in my review, and then also ranking all of them from my least favorite to my most favorite. I don't have all 6 of the books with me, but I do have 5 of them. One I ended up giving a copy to my friend, and I never ended up getting another copy, so I just have these 5. In order, I read The Fault in Our Stars, Abundance of Catherine's, Turtles All the Way Down, Paper Towns, Anthropocene Reviewed, and then lastly, Looking for Alaska. This was the most recent book that I read. But I am glad that now I've read all of them, I can sort of take a step back and do some reflecting on what I've learned. The one thing that got me really hooked on John Green's writing is just the way he uses his words to shape the story and to shape the meaning of how they affect the characters and how the moral of the story comes to be. There are so many things from the books that whenever I would read them, I would just add it to my book notes because it was just something I wanted to remember and make sure I kept in my mind. But I will start with the first book, which is The Fault in Our Stars. And this is a story about a girl with cancer, and she's sort of navigating life, trying to figure out what she's going to do with her life, and meets someone else who also has cancer, and it's sort of like a love story between them, but also a friendship. I guess as a teen, I know that there can be some struggles in our generation, and I think he does a really great job of capturing that in his books. I give this book a 9 out of 10 just because it is so good. Just the way he wrote everything and the pacing was so amazing. It was one of those books that put me into a slump and changed my perspective on how I see the impermanence of life, especially since the characters have this terminal illness that could possibly affect how long their life is. So overall, very solid start to my John Green journey. Next we got An Abundance of Catherine's. This book was also quite a journey as well, and I wasn't sure exactly what to expect when I came to this book. I knew it was going to be good, and I knew it was going to be unique and a coming of age story, and reading the back excerpts I've learned from the John Green books doesn't really give you a lot of hints about what the story is about, because it's more than just like a story following a character. It's a story about someone learning about the wisdoms of life, coming to terms with some of the lessons that they have to learn. That is not very easy to fit into 2 paragraphs on the back of a book. So this book is about a kid named Colin Singleton who is very into girls named Catherine, aka he has dated 19 girls named Catherine. He's sort of contemplating his life and how it's gotten to be this way, which is crazy, like I would be too. But he goes on a road trip to sort of discover himself with his best friend, and he ends up meeting some pretty cool people. And the one thing I really thought was unique about this book was the way that he used footnotes to kind of show the inner workings of the character's mind, and the way that the character sort of goes off on tangents in his own mind and has these threads of thoughts that kind of get lost and tangled up all inside of his mind. Alright, I want to read some quotes that I really liked from this book. I got my laptop here, so I'm just going to read some off for you. Colin Singleton's distance from his classes made him realize his problem, myopia. He was nearsighted. The future before him, inevitable and invisible. And I think this is really interesting how he uses that analogy to show how like people can see things right in front of them but not realize it. And then another one I really liked, which is right at the beginning, is crying adds something. Crying is you plus tears. But the feeling Colin had was something horrible opposite of crying. It was you minus something. And I've never thought to think of it that way. And that's the great thing about John Green. He makes you see things totally upside down. But this book was amazing, so this is an 8 out of 10. Alright, next we have Turtles All the Way Down, which is also a very interesting book as well. A lot of life comes from understanding and having empathy for other people. And I think having stories like this where you can really see inside someone's head and know what demons they're facing is a great way to have that empathy and to practice that. And this book had really natural dialogue between Isa and her best friend. When I was reading it, the dialogue sounded so natural and so real. It sounded like something that I'd say to my friend, which I think is such a bonus because when you're reading it, like you get so lost in it, it kind of feels like real life to you. One of my favorite quotes like ever from a book I've read is actually from Turtles All the Way Down. And it goes, Dr. Singh told me once that if you perfectly tuned a guitar and a perfectly tuned violin in the same room, and you pluck the D string of the guitar, that all the way across the room, the D string of the violin will also vibrate. I could always feel my mother's vibrating strings. After I read that, I had to sit there for a minute and really take that in. How do you write that? It's ingenious. It's so genius. Alright, now it's time for Paper Towns, which is a hardcover copy and a signed copy, so this one is very special to me. And it's also doubly as special because it's set in my hometown, and because John Green also lives in my hometown, I kind of got that special connection, that reader-author connection that he was talking about in one of his books, in one of the readers sections. And actually, fun fact, recently this weekend I went to the Dr. Phillips Center for the Arts, and I was going to see Mamma Mia with my theater troupe. And I realized that right next door, John Green is literally right next door to the theater that we're at. And I was so sad because I could not get to see him. I could not get the chance to go inside that theater because they're going on at the exact same time. So I'm very sad I missed it. But I guess you live and you move on. So that's what we're doing. We're moving on to Paper Towns. I think the imagery of this is so beautiful because the reason why it's called Paper Towns is because he's talking about how the town seems so superficial. And I think living in Florida, I've sort of got a bit of that. It's just all the houses can tend to look the same and all the people can tend to act the same and be the same. And it can feel very paper, like there's no substance there. And he was able to express that very nicely in this book. It's also really interesting because I'm going into my senior year and this book is also about senior year. So as I was reading it, I was like, oh, this is what I'll maybe be experiencing next year. I also think it's really interesting how he does the whole dynamic of the main character, Quentin, who is really imagining what the main girl, Margot, is like, always having these kind of imaginations and visions of what he sees their relationship could be like together, but has this imagination that isn't really truthful to what the actual situation is, which shows how easily people can misimagine things and misinterpret what things are than what they actually are. One of the quotes that kind of describes this in the book goes, "There are so many people full to bursting and each of them imaginable and constantly misimagined." It's so easy to think someone is a completely opposite way than they actually are. And I would give Paper Towns a solid 9 out of 10 because it is just such a perfect book. So much mystery. And even at the end, it gets really intense when they're trying to find Margot and get her final location. It has an hour by hour countdown, which I thought was really neat. But moving right along to the Anthropocene Reviewed. And this has one of the most beautifully colored covers. It's kind of giving me the tube with all these interacting little ribbons that wrap around the whole book. It kind of reminds me of a subway system, which maybe it's a metaphor for how all the knowledge in the world can kind of overlap and interact and weave into each other. But these are essays on a human-centered planet, and it's basically just you take a bunch of fun facts and then put them into a book, and he also adds his own personal narrative behind each of the stories. And I really liked this one because it's very philosophical, and now that I'm trying to read more books and double what I read last year, I'm trying to get into more philosophy books. It was very academic. It's still very easy to read, which is so crazy because you would think that it could be really hard and difficult. He made it really simple to understand. I left this book with a lot of new fun facts and a lot of new things to pull up if I ever get to a trivia competition. So an 8 out of 10 for this one. So now we got Looking for Alaska, and this one is about Miles Holter, who goes to this boarding school in Alabama, and he is trying to live his life there and try to just not get bullied, which does end up happening on the first day when he gets thrown into a lake in his underwear and almost drowns. But he finds his roommate who is really sweet to him, and also Alaska. And he starts to fall in love with Alaska, whoop-de-doo. And then by the middle, when it gets really intense, a character dies and like a very traumatic event happens. And it talks about the before and after the event. Before, when you were making memories of the person and getting to know someone, and then after, when you're reminiscing on those memories and thinking back to what happened in the situation. And I think the most interesting thing to me was the, the post-rationalization that I saw near the end of the book about how he was talking about a lot of calendar events, and a lot of our time is based on before and after an event, such as AD and BC, before and after Christ. And I think that was very interesting, and it was very interesting how he's able to incorporate that into the book. Here's a really good quote that I'm going to read that I think really encapsulates the whole vibe of the book. "Everything that comes together falls apart," the old man said. "Everything. The chair I'm sitting on, it was built, and so it will fall apart. I'm going to fall apart, probably before this chair. And you're going to fall apart. The cells and organs and systems that make you, you. They came together, grew together, and so they must fall apart. The Buddha knew one thing science didn't prove for millennia after his death. Entropy increases, things fall apart." And I think this is a very important message that we need to keep in mind. But wow, that was a lot of books to go through. But now that we're finally finished with that, I can get to my rankings. Alright, at number 6, I'm putting Looking for Alaska, only because it was sort of like a 50-50 book for me. I really did like it. I thought it was like a unique plot, but by that time, I had already kind of read like some of his best writing and some of my favorite writing, so it didn't really hit to me as much. Number 5 is going to be Turtles All the Way Down. I did really enjoy this book, and I enjoyed it more after I kind of got through the slower sections at the beginning and started to really understand what this book is talking about. And I don't really think you get that till the end, and I think needing to go through all of that does kind of put it on a lower bar for me. At number 4 is The Anthropocene Reviewed. Of course, all these books are really good, but The Anthropocene Reviewed was the only non-fiction book that I read from him, and I think it was like really interesting hearing about his personal life and his personal stories. Hearing a real story is kind of a different thing that I really enjoyed, and I just loved all of the essays, so I would put this higher if I could, but there are other books that I think I liked more. Number 3 is Paper Towns. I had such a strong connection to this one when first reading it because I found it in my dad's hometown, and it's about my hometown, so I think that's just like such a perfect story. And also it's about senior year, which is what I'm experiencing right now, so what more of a perfect time to have this book. I was able to like really get into this book and get into the plot. I gave it a 9 out of 10 and the 3rd place on this list. For number 2, Abundance of Catherines, and I really enjoyed this book. It was so good, and I did hear a lot of reviews or people talking about this book saying they didn't really like it that much, but I think the whole thing he did with like the footnotes was so unique, and I also loved reading the little excerpts at the end and the interviews with John Green, because it really like shows you how much work and thought and planning goes into writing a book, and I think with this one he did pretty good. And number 1, The Fault in Our Stars. It is such a classic, and it's the first book that I read from John Green, so I think for me that gives it that extra leg up. I just love this book so much because it made me cry, and it made me feel, and it really made me just see things in a whole new light that wasn't necessarily negative. It was like a positive light that made me want to go out into the world and be more curious and live life more adventurously and on the edge, and I think that's a really great thing to pull from a book. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to me yap about John Green, but he is like literally my idol, and I love his writing so much. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment down below if you have a favorite author or favorite book, because I'm always trying to get new recommendations. And I will leave you here But until I see you next time, peace out.